Hey, I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Matt King.
And we are the Video Island Podcast.
That's right. And on today's episode, we'll be talking about the pros and cons in producing in-house video versus outsourcing your video productions.
All right, and welcome back to another episode. This episode, you may notice that my beard is gone. Well, it's not completely gone. I'm not beardless. It's just less beard.
You're a little less man of the woods.
And then we're both wearing hoodies. And you got for our watchers, our viewers who are watching, Matt's got the spiral string going on.
Yeah, I had a situation where my branded company sweater went through the washing machine and got a little tangled up. So I have a spiralized string now for my hoodie, so you know, some people pay a lot of money for that. So
and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today is hoodies and spiralized strings and having no beards. No, I'm just kidding. Today's episode is actually going to be about in-house video production versus outsourcing video production.
That's right. Every side there has its, pros and cons associated with it. So if you kind of educate yourself on, the differences and where one can suit you best, you can make the most of your team if you do have an in-house team, or at least make the most of your budget if you are looking to outsource. So.
Exactly. Now, with this episode, we're going to go a bit differently because you actually just did a webinar a couple weeks back, literally on this topic, and you pretty much laid out the groundwork for myself in this episode to kind of, run the flow and the process of this episode.
I teed you up.
Yeah, you teed me up. Yeah. Well, to tee you up.
To tee me up, it's a double T.
So I guess the first thing, let's dive into kind of the pros and cons of, working with, a video production house, outsourcing that work. Yeah. Let me pull up my handy dandy phone here that you shared with me, and all these points I completely agree with as well. But I'm just going to list off the pros right now, and then we can kind of riff on them.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, you said the pros with outsourcing your video, it's neutral and you get an unbiased view. You get a full creative suite of hardware and software. Yeah. You can specialize film knowledge, so this can be in motion graphics, animation, advanced editing, etc. You can have a portfolio of similar work and of clients. It can be easier to predict costs and timelines, and then can lend help on all aspects of the project.
That's right.
So that was the list that you put together for your webinar. Now let's kind of just go back and just kind of riff on each of these points before diving into the cons.
Yeah. So as it was kind of listed in the notes there is that like I had mentioned, you get an unbiased view. So
yes, that was your first point right there. Was the neutral and an unbiased view. Yeah. So if you want to add on there, and kind of what you're thinking.
Yeah, for sure. So why I said that is that I find that if you have a team that starts to kind of build out the vision for what you want your video to look like, you can kind of get a little bit stuck in a rut unintentionally if you're not careful of kind of speaking your own in-house language and company jargon and things like that without necessarily having somebody from the outside to bounce ideas off of and bounce terms and certain things you're looking to showcase in the video, and make sure that it makes sense for an outside viewer. So bringing in that outside team, video production team, hopefully they're going to be a team that has writers and all the other kinds of people on the staff, so that they're not just people that operate a camera. You get more kind of a well-rounded group. They're going to be able to tell you whether or not you need to kind of rephrase things maybe a little bit to make it a little bit more open-ended or a little bit more broadly accepted, so that if you're making a video, it's going to be able to make sense to more people, kind of thing. So having that unbiased outside point of view and perspective really helps to make, at the end of the day, the best out of your video. So you have to kind of go into it with an open mind that maybe that video production company is going to have a couple tweaks that they want to make, but it's usually, more often than not, it's for the best end product at the end of the day.
Yeah, because I guess with that, right, they'll have a similar mindset and perspective. That's right. Obviously a little bit more, just given that they're working with the company about said product or whatever it is that they're, the message they're trying to get across in said video. But yeah, with that kind of third body or third party outside looking in perspective, it really kind of helps, give that outside perspective into your messaging and really help kind of resonate to the viewer.
Yep, and I mean, video production companies coming into our organization or company have really made a big difference. Like I said, not in terms of just like the visual quality and all that kind of thing, but like I said, in terms of like giving your marketing team, for example, the opportunity to kind of, maybe even redefine their messaging in case things are just a little bit off and they're not going down the right path. And it really makes you look introspectively in a big way at, if you need to change things up, for the future, not just for this video, but just company-wide, right? So it can have bigger effects, which really help.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and then even too from like a marketing side of things, right? Like, the business may be, so keen on using the buzzwords and all that type of stuff, where maybe, it comes off a little too markety. And then again, working with that video team who aren't so, marketing centric per se, and kind of keep their messaging, real, I guess you could say, that without using, we're synergizing two technologies to blah blah blah. It just keeps it pretty grounded and human, right?
Yep.
So so I think that's a big great context right there around just that unbiased and that neutral perspective when working with that third party. Now you also your second point was a full creative suite of hardware and software.
Yeah, I mean that kind of goes without saying that if you're hiring an outside vendor to produce your videos, chances are they're going to have access to a lot better equipment and a lot better tools in their computer to be able to make a more versatile or better end product. Chances are, like I said, some of the editing systems that we use in-house are very much the same as what the outside company that we go to uses, but maybe they have a 3D animator on staff, right? Which means that they're more well-versed in the 3D animation side, if that's what we need for a specific
or just their computers themselves are more suited for to process and have more RAM and whatnot to or video cards, graphic cards and whatnot to have the power to actually pump those animations, whatever it be, faster.
It's not
even
like
from editing too, right?
That's right. It's not like we have bad computers by any means. I mean, I'm definitely benefiting off of a recent new computer that we got, and it's a really good computer. But chances
why don't you just tell them what kind of computer
it's an iMac Pro computer, an iMac Pro. So
now we may have some haters, we may have some people who are fanboys, fangirls
of the PC world,
of the PC, well, and who like their Macs, but then you also have those people who don't like Macs.
That's right.
Regardless.
I like how it runs. It just seems to work well. You definitely pay the price for it. It's not cheap, but it seems to work really well. And we shoot a lot in 4K, so the working at that resolution with larger file sizes, it seems to handle that footage well without kind of crashing and having a lot of hiccups. So my playback when I'm editing is pretty smooth. So like I said, along those lines and further, those outside vendors are going to have the technology, hopefully, to be able to withstand those larger, more heavy-duty edits without it kind of being a real crunch on their systems.
Yeah, so that's from the software perspective, but then you also have, and what you alluded to here was the hardware side of things, and we shoot, like, we have 4K cameras here and whatnot, but we don't have what the companies that we work with when we outsource, they're shooting on Reds.
On a Red cinema camera,
which is...
Yeah, if you suit up, and you spend the right amount of budget on a cinema camera plus cinema lenses, you're well over a $50,000 for just your camera rig, if not more, depending on what you're investing in, right? So, I mean, our probably entire suite of equipment in-house, which is pretty versatile in itself, is probably worth like 20. Altogether, that's lights, microphones, cameras, like everything, right? So that's like a blip on the radar for a lot of outside vendors. So they're coming with the gear to be able to be as versatile as possible and have, it's not just always about having the fanciest gear, but sometimes that equipment allows you to do different things or just have more ability to be flexible with what you're shooting and what you're working with. So that's really what comes down to. Our lights are only so strong that we have in-house, whereas they're going to have really heavy-duty lights that can do some amazing things with shaping light and recreating outside light in an indoor setting. Blocking light, all that kind of stuff. That comes from, putting some money down. So that's definitely something.
And then even that comes with that, like I know you mentioned software and hardware, but there's also the other aspects of, and we've relied on this one, outsourcing, is just the fact that they are generally better equipped at finding sets. And doing the staging, and then even finding actors and working with the different agencies that they work with and recruiting actors for the productions.
Yep, they're doing a lot more work with actors than what we are for sure in-house. So if you're an in-house video producer yourself, you know, your chances are oftentimes you're working with, you know, people that are employees of the company, right? So they're not actors, right? And oftentimes we're not looking for people to act, but we need people to kind of work on memorization of lines and things like that. And for some, even though they're in a specific role that we'd like to highlight that role, and we need them to kind of, you know, practice up on a script that we're going to have them read back to camera, even though they're the professional in that role, maybe they're not the best suited to be on camera and have those lines come off pretty naturally, right? So the option is there for the appropriate video to have an actor come in and who's a professional, obviously, at, you know, scripting and making it come out natural. And that's where it kind of helps to have an outside agency that has a short list of actors that they like to use, and you know you can kind of rely on them, right? So they've done a lot of the vetting, just probably also through trial and error. Probably, I'm sure at times they've hired actors that haven't been so great. So they're not, chances are they're not gonna, you know, when we're working with them to produce a video for us, they're not gonna like have those actors in the mix. They're gonna obviously vet through a lot of those bad ones already. So it does help to, you know, save yourself and dodge a few bullets from hiring actors in-house and then realizing that they were pretty rubbish. So, and then you just wasted a bunch of time and potential money. So last thing you wanna do, so yeah.
So we kind of talked about like the software and stuff and 3D and whatnot. So that actually kind of segues, I guess even with the hardware of, you know, cameras, lighting, because your next point is specializing in film knowledge. Now that's, you know, from my understanding is that we're talking about just people who like are experts in specific verticals, whether it's, you know,
of a set, of a video, of being on a production,
whatever kind of production, because as you kind of even say here, motion graphics, you know, 3D animation and whatnot, you know, you will, depending on what you want from your video, right, you're going to be looking for the people who are best in those areas of the production, whether that's across the board or because maybe you're doing some over-the-top video that requires 3D rendering or 3D, you know, CG effects or, you know, motion graphics that are intertwined with the video, or not. Maybe it's just you really want to go big with this video, right, and you want someone who's just really good with the camera, you know, like you know, maybe you go with a company who has like a director of photography, you know, who just has that eye for just really nice shot composition, and then bringing in someone who's like really good with lighting and, you know. Yeah,
you have an art director, you know, somebody that's working on set to do staging, you know, of your set, to put things in your, watch what's in the background, watch what's in the foreground, you know, bring props, things like that. All those kind of specialized fields are what take your video to that next level of kind of refinement, so to speak, right? So we ourselves have a video production background. That's what we went to school for, but not everybody has that. When, you know, some people might be starting off as like content people, you know, maybe they started off in writing and journalism or something like that, or just social media and in a marketing role, and they have to learn, and maybe they have a little bit of a background, or they just kind of dabbled in photo or video, but now they're expected to take on things a little bit more heavily on the video side. You can also learn a lot from working with an outside agency and kind of picking their brain on things and seeing what they're doing on set to kind of refine your skills in-house kind of thing. So there's a double benefit there, right? But definitely if you're looking for something that's going to be a little bit more intricate, relying on those outside agencies because they've done it time and time again, chances are they're going to be the ones to be able to walk into a room and be like, okay, they can immediately analyze a scene and kind of know what needs to be done to a space to get it ready for being shot in, right? So, and not everybody has that. Some people will just walk in and just be like, all right, this is good as is. It's like, no, but you can kind of break down any kind of space and realize what needs to change, what needs to move, what we need to take out, anything like that. So it takes a lot of work to get to that level, right? So practice.
Yeah, so then let's move on to our next point that you have here, and that's a portfolio of similar work/clients.
Yeah, so that really means it's like, okay, you have an idea as a company that you want to produce a certain type of video, right? And you have, you're not exactly sure how to produce that video or make it come to life. You have, maybe it's like you want to do like a high, top of funnel marketing campaign that's pretty big, pretty lofty, right? It's going to be something that lasts for a long time, so you want to throw some budget behind it. Being able to go to an outside agency, chances are they've produced something, maybe not exactly the same thing, hopefully, because the last thing you want to do is kind of be repetitious and redundant, but they've handled something of that scale, right? So that they're not jumping into the deep end, crossing their fingers, hoping that they can make something come about that has that ability to last for a very long time, and it's not dated, in a year. It doesn't look like, this is kind of like scrappy and put together, right? So that's where, again, that wealth of knowledge and background with an outside agency comes in hand, because they've seen, chances are, lots of different types of productions before. Therefore, they can kind of come at it from the best angle and decide how to treat your video appropriately based on your budget, everything like that.
Yeah, and then even myself, I've never been part of a big production team.
Right.
Myself, I've done this, but I've also worked with external agencies or video vendors, and I've, from both perspectives, have done the situation where it's like you want to do this video and then it's pulling up a previous video you've done or that they've done, and kind of been like, oh, you're thinking something like this.
Right.
And then, not every time, but there's a majority of those times when you do show them, they're like, yeah, I'm thinking of something like that. Right. And it just goes right, it fits with the point that you're making, that, with that portfolio and just that kind of experience, it just kind of validates that they are, the experts and know exactly what they're doing, because if they're able to pick up on what you're trying to capture and then even pull up an example that they've done that kind of fits, it just shows you that, they're ready, and the versatility on them, is pretty robust to be able to, go and achieve what exactly you're looking for.
You're working with a good agency at the end of the day. It's that idea behind inspiration versus recreation. You want to take inspiration from something. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what kind of, gets people excited, is that, you start to find examples of things that you kind of like, and you can kind of hybrid things together, or, kind of make something all your own. But the last thing you want to do is recreate, because that just kind of sucks.
Blatantly shot for shot, like a rip.
That's the last thing you want to do. So if you find a good agency, they're going to be able to take your inspiration or your combined inspiration and kind of make something come to life. But last thing you want to do is make a carbon copy of something that's been made. So
so let's just, because we got a lot to go through, so let's just jump into the next point here. So we have, can be easier to predict costs and timelines.
That's right, yeah. So I mean, if you're fairly fresh to video as a company, working with an outsource, again, they're gonna, like we said just before, they've been in this game probably for a while, so they're gonna be able to have a better, quicker estimate as to timelines. Often most videos from being delivered to a marketing team, you generally look averaging about like a month kind of timeline, month and a half, 2 months kind of thing, depending on the video that you're making. Obviously costs are incurred for a rushed timeline, so if you're looking to do things under a month, chances are the agency's going to have kind of a bumper on top of their price to be able to get it to you faster. But that's generally the range for most videos. Alongside that, they've priced out lots of these before. They know what it costs, to bring their team for the amount of time that they need to be there, actors, the time it's going to take to edit, how many times and iterations you need to refine a script, things like that, and bounce it back and forth. So all those different steps from pre-production to production to editing, they factored in 1,000 times before, so they can give you a better price.
And most cases than not, the production team will have a structure, and given, their experience, they can generally, based off that experience, can generally set out a rough timeline from probably the initial meeting. Because obviously they'll have an understanding of what are the projects they have on the go, the resources that they have, and then again, just based off the scope when working with the client, right?
Yeah, I think it's very much like you get what you pay for, right?
Yeah.
So companies that I've worked with previously, it's like you have a minimum cost essentially to show up and be on set for a half day or a full day, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the bare minimum cost is this to get people on, like crew members, to the set, wherever that might be, your office, on a stage, like an actual like video set somewhere. There's a cost associated with that just to do that step, let alone everything else, right? So, and that's when it starts to kind of build from there. Again, like you can get somebody that doesn't necessarily factor those things in, but oftentimes you'll get what you pay for. So if they just have one general flat rate fee for making a certain kind of video, chances are you're kind of looking at somebody that's doing a volume play, which means that if they're just hunting for volume, means that you're just kind of like one in many of their kind of customers. Chances are that they're trying to get in just to kind of fill up their like pipeline of business, right? Which means you just don't get that kind of same interaction generally with that vendor. So it's again, you get what you pay for.
Yep. And so our last point on our pros before we dive into the cons of working with an outsourced agency or video production team, however you want to label it as, is they can lend help on all aspects of the project.
I think this is kind of like a redundant point, but it's an important one to kind of point out on its own at the same time. So yeah, it's very much like, at times I'll even point out that, you know, we've used companies, I know we're going to talk about this later, but we've used companies where we get them to help us refine our script, and then they'll do the production, but then we'll take in the edit ourselves. So sometimes you only need a company to do a portion of the work if you find a trusted partner that will allow you to take on what they've created. You know, so it's a trust factor there. But you know, if they can help on every aspect, that means that maybe if you build out their relationship for long enough, you can then start to pull some of those things back into your internal team if they're talented enough to be able to take that on. So we've been lucky enough to be able to do that, which is a cost-saving measure at the end of the day. So we can outsource, you know, the production because they're going to be able to bring on the actors and the video equipment that we don't have access to on a daily basis, and give us the look that we're going for. But then we know we can handle, and we have the timeline ability to be able to take on the edit. So being able to be versatile in all aspects means that you can kind of plug and play where you need to.
Yeah. Now, we have a little bit of bias just given that we ourselves have the video production background, but then you gotta think also at the same time, coming from someone who is either doesn't have anyone in-house for video, or maybe they just have that one video person who is very beginner and, you know, is just kind of learning the ropes of video production. You know, then that's when you can look to the video producers or the you know, the production house who can help with all those aspects, you know, as we kind of talked about, you know, with the scripting and stuff, you know, in regards to the bias messaging and whatnot, and having that outside perspective. But then they just have a better understanding, you know, of the flow and the process, you know, doing the storyboarding and, you know, just what would work best to keeping it, you know, the story. And again, it obviously comes down to what video you're producing, but, you know, keeping it nice and concise, but still, you know, hitting the point home.
Yeah. I think it's big too, and sometimes you might land on a company that doesn't necessarily kind of jive with what your business and what your brand is, but it's important to kind of identify that off the bat, because it's not necessarily a stupendous thing to have 5 different video agencies that you're outsourcing videos to, because chances are they're all going to have their certain biases and ways of doing things a little bit. So if you can find 1 or 2 kind of trusted, you know, vendors that you can go to outsource work to, chances are you're going to be able to kind of refine that brand and that identity, that visual identity, so that when anybody watches a video of your company, it has the same look and feel for the most part, right? Which is ideally what you're striving for at the end of the day. You don't just want to make videos that kind of look different every single time, because you want to be able, again, for them to, it's like watch any commercial from a fairly popular brand. Chances are it's going to have a look and a feel to it that you can identify as that brand's style, right? And that's what you're looking to achieve, I think, with video at the end of the day. So I think that's important.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. So that, you know, is just kind of a condensed, I'm sure we can riff on more points, but that's kind of what you've had here in regards to pros. Yeah. And then, so let's dive into the cons, you know, the not so pretty things when it comes to outsourcing video production.
And I think most of these will kind of speak for themselves too. So once we go rip through the list, if there's anything I kind of find that I need to touch on more, I'll kind of dabble on it. But
so obviously, you know, well, I shouldn't say it's obvious, but first point we have here, working with the video production team is more expensive, on per video cost. There is that loss of internal control. You're competing for time with other clients, and then harder to control reshoot, and this is a good one, harder to control reshoots and multiple edits. Limited agency choices in your area, so obviously depending on where you live. And then more communications needed to finalize details.
That's right. So to kind of encapsulate a lot of those points, I mean, chances are likelihood being yes, that if you're working with an outside agency, there's a lot more people to pay to have them show up and be on set and create a video. So chances are it's going to be more expensive than you producing one in-house, more often than not. But again, sometimes you get what you pay for, so it just depends, right? So you have to weigh it out that way. Aside from that, I was thinking of a point and I lost it.
Oh, well, I was just going to say to add to the cost of a video. I'm going to say and it really comes down to the video type and the scope of the production, but you could be looking anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 and even more, when it comes to a video production. That's just for one video, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're investing that much money into a video, there's less wiggle room for mistakes because that video doesn't perform or doesn't, and then it's just, you don't see the ROI on that video. It's not, helping your business or, well, I guess it's generally a business that would be, dropping this amount of money for a video. But yeah, you wouldn't see that it's, sticking and generating, the buzz that, everyone wants to see. And it's luring them in to obviously drive more business. Whereas, in this situation, and I don't want to jump ahead, but with in-house, you could have that small team or maybe just that one person, and depending on what the content is, they could be cranking out. Sure, the production level is not that high, but if it's a little bit more run and gun, they could be producing multiple videos. So it really comes down to what type of content or video content that you want to be making and what is worth the bang for your buck.
That's right. So kind of touching on that point, I remember what I was going to say. So the other factor there is talking about kind of in-house versus outsource in that same way is that brought up one of the cons being that if you did need to kind of there was something that you didn't want to change. So maybe 6 months later, you had a video produced by an outside agency, and something fairly major about maybe it was a product video, and you show it's a 2-minute product video, and something about that product drastically changed. Well, it kind of sucks to have to go back to that outside agency to get them to reshoot a portion or redo the whole thing, depending on the complexity. The beauty of having an in-house team, and depending on the level of complexity of that product video or whatever video you're producing, is that there's that more of a flexibility in terms of kind of pulling a video back in and kind of reshooting a section in case if that's a possibility, right? So we've had it where there's instances where we've kind of shot something and then we decided that we wanted to change things up. Being the in-house video producers, we're able to do that fairly quickly. Right, so it's not like a long wait with a sizable price tag associated with it. We can get things done on a pretty fast basis. So
so this is in relation to your one point about harder to control reshoots and multiple edits. Then you kind of so you also mentioned loss of internal control.
Yes. I think the loss of control is, I think, a good thing, to a certain degree. You have to be comfortable with a little bit of control being passing that over. So there's a trust factor when you're hiring an outside agency.
But to play off the point of it being a con is that there is, that chance when you're working with the vendor, and it could be, whatever your product is, and maybe it's complex and it's just, maybe the vendor didn't,
they don't quite identify.
They didn't click with it, and and they don't really, nail the message on the head, right? And just given that they're not, so deep within the messaging and whatnot, that they, didn't get a full understanding, right? So I think, when we talk about lose of internal control, there is that kind of, focus on making sure that the messaging, whatever that associates with the brand, is spot on.
Yeah, I think that just comes from good dialogue up front, you know.
Yeah.
If you kind of nail that out front, then, you know, chances are, as you're going through the rest of the phases and they're including you in those processes, chances are you're going to nail that messaging on the head, hopefully.
Yeah. So then we also have competing for time with other clients. So as we, I don't know if it was you or myself that briefly touched on it, but there are going to be other clients that the production house will be working with.
Yep.
So
I think it's like, if they're good, they'll make you feel like you're the only client they have right now, right? If they're good. It should be kind of obvious that hopefully they have more than just you on the go, right? In terms of their client base. Great if they don't, but I mean, it's good to see a video production be successful and a lot of people using them, because that means that chances are they're probably pretty good, right? Obviously the downside is that if they're really popular, it can affect your timeline. So
well, yeah, and nothing against, you know, the production team, like, you know, the ones that we've worked with and whatnot, but there are going to be those times because you aren't their only client, so it's not like they're just sitting around waiting for you. So maybe there's something that comes up, or you have a question, whatever it be, and you send them an email. They may not be so responsive and, you know, reply within the next 30 minutes to an hour. You know, there's been situations where, they've just been tied up with another, because they obviously have to, you know, put clothes on their own backs and feed their families. So like they're working hard. So they're on shoot. They're doing, you know, on set for another production, and in those cases they're pretty well busy and they don't really have the time to look at their phone and pull up an email. And maybe they looked at it and read it, and you know, depending on the urgency of it, they'll probably wait to respond maybe during a break or when the shoot's over.
Yeah, I think that's like the benefits and the takeaways kind of thing of like being in constant access. You know, it's like with email, it definitely, obviously I'm the generation that kind of came up with that, but like, I mean, it's pretty easy to look back and be like, man, like, it kind of was nice to not necessarily expect to have a response for somebody in like 1 hour's time. You know, the amount of emails I've had in the past, or like the company I worked for in the past has received, you know, an hour past and they're like, why haven't you gotten back to me? Like, blah, blah, blah. It's super urgent because it's all top of mind for them. But, you know, if you're all on set and you just don't have a chance to look at your phone, like you said, it's like, it's nothing against them. It's not like you're ignoring them. It's just, you got a job to do. So you're just trying to do it, and you're trying to make somebody else feel like you care about what you're producing for them, and you'll get to it, right? The worst thing that a company will do is not get back to you in a fair but timely fashion, right? So it's all about just kind of like having those expectations outlined ahead of time, right? So
and then we also have the point, limited agency choices in your area. So this is definitely, you know, a strong point, because you may not live in a bigger city, and that, you know, that's just saturated with different production houses or freelance video producers and whatnot. So in that situation, you're kind of stuck with what you have. That's local based. You know, you obviously do have the choice to extend and find production houses that are, you know, several kilometers, or if you're in the US, you're miles away. But again, that does add to the factor of cost and whatnot, because if it, depending how big of the shoot, then they have to come, and then they have to pay for accommodations and whatnot. So
if you're way out there, then they're gonna make you pay for accommodations, and that'll be factored in the price. There'll be mileage,
all that.
I mean, maybe that's a really good kind of draw to hire in and recruit an inside producer for your videos, right? Start there, and on the big ones that you're looking to produce, go to an outside agency that you're willing to spend that money on, having them come to you because you're a couple hours outside of the main city or something like that. But you know, look into recruiting an inside producer. So I'm excited. Go inside in-house producers.
And then our last point before we jump into that is more communication needed to finalize details.
I think that just kind of goes without saying is that there's going to be versions of, an edit that are going to have to go back and forth. You have to take that, you have to wait for that edit to come in from that agency. Then it gets shared between all the team members at your company, and then hopefully you can kind of or they'll have some kind of system in place in terms of taking feedback, so it's all collected and it's not just coming in kind of rapid fire like shrapnel. That's the worst case scenario. So if you're looking to hire an outside agency, if they don't have that system set up, on your end, take the responsibility in-house yourself to take all those comments onto a spreadsheet and deliver them all at one time, and make sure that any of those people that will have the ability to make a big change and kind of bring things to a grinding halt, get their comments out of the way as soon as possible, because last thing you want to do is like have them working on the next version of the edit and find out that they need to take 2 steps back because this person that should have had input didn't, and then they're kind of causing this stall to happen, and maybe it throws off timelines and things like that, and that's the last thing you want. Because last thing you want, again, obviously at the end of the day, is a missed timeline, missed timeline with added expense because you've now blown over your allotment in terms of editing revisions, because people are just throwing comments at them, and generally speaking, if they're feeling like if they're a strong enough, video production team, they'll be able to tell you'll be able to look at a list of kind of comments and decide what the priorities are. There's maybe a few things in there that are like nice to haves versus like this absolutely needs to change. And you have to be honest with yourself as a company about that. It's like, are we just kind of nitpicking and we'd like to see A versus B? You know what I mean? It's like, is it really making a difference, or are we just commenting to comment because we feel like we need to put something down?
Exactly.
So that open honesty with your in-house team is going to make sure that your communication going out to the agency is kind of refined and timely. So,
no, I completely agree. So Mr. Excited over here.
In-house, you should be just as excited. We're both the in-house guys.
I know. So we just talked to, we just went through a lot of pros and cons in regards to outsourcing your video production. Now, let's, spin it around and talk in regards to the pros and cons for in-house production teams. So again, let's kind of I'm going to run through the list that you have here for pros, which is deeply understand your brand. You have full creative control, owning your own equipment, and then we have also the ability to set your own timeline, output tied directly to team size, and then budget is usually lower.
Chances are it's going to be lower, than hiring an outside agency with a bunch of fancy equipment and fancy people.
So let's dive in that first point. So deeply understanding your brand.
Again, if you can remove the bias and have somewhat of an outside perspective on are people going to understand the language that we're speaking, you're going to have the best chance of representing your brand because you are a part of that company, right? So you live and breathe what your company is, what you stand for, who you're looking to serve best, right? So there's a lot of pluses associated with that. You just have to make sure that when you are creating a script or building out the communication, that you're going to be speaking the language that's broad enough to be able to encapsulate a lot of those potential customers, right? So that's really important. If you speak to like a very niche group, well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get a small fraction of that niche group of people that are going to understand the lingo and the language that you're talking, right? And being open and honest about what your brand is, let's face it, like most, companies that deal with finance aren't going to necessarily be like big party animals per se, right? I mean, speak for yourself, sure, but like chances are like you're not going to be like, we're cool too, you know what I mean? And if you try to do that and you do that like really cornball like in-house music video, we're like, we produced a music video, and like and you're doing like a lip dub to like something, and you have just people like awkwardly dancing in shirt and ties around the office, unless you like you nail it, which is going to really take a lot of like really creative talent. It's going to come out kind of corny and really kind of dumb. It could kind of almost harm your business, you know what I mean? Because you can almost look like not focused if it's not produced well. But if it's produced like because you had a lot of outside assistance in terms of making sure it comes out less cornball and like more kind of like talented and kind of wickedly clever, Wickedly Clever is like where you need to be at in producing something like that, for example, you know what I mean? But it's a delicate balance. So identifying what your company stands for and what your brand is and kind of steering into that is probably going to best happen with in-house people.
Yeah, and just to riff on that as well, right? Like, as you're saying, like the culture will shine through because you understand the brand, and then what, you know, is an element of what makes a brand is obviously the culture of that company and how they kind of present themselves.
That's right.
So yeah, you'll just have a better understanding at harnessing that and then having that show through the video content. But then at the same time also, having that in-house team will have consistency and they'll just kind of have like, and they're subtle, but there'll be little staples, the little things that carry out through each video, just given it's the same person working on that, and just their individual style on top of the brand and the culture and whatnot will come through. And it'll just, and as I said, like there'll be these staples, and whatever those things are, maybe it's the editing style, the music that person generally uses, the
lighting.
You know, these things will carry through, and then, you know, and especially if you have a big audience that, you know, follows. Once they see a new video, they'll have that connection where it's like, oh, this, because just based off those things, they'll just, you know, have that quicker, you know, assumption that, oh, this is so-and-so brand's video. This is a whatever, and then, you know, and then buy in that way.
A kind of a flip side to that actually is kind of funny because if you can nail that as a company, that's what I think most companies strive for, is like making sure that they're strong in their brand and their identity, because they want to be able to represent that to and share that to their customers or potential customers, right? But what's funny about that is that we know of certain outside video agencies that have their own style, and they actually often get hired on because of the way that they produce their videos. So they'll even have people that are on their own in-house staff that are also like actors. So they put their own in-house video production staff on camera, but they have a way of being that, you know, that's a part of their brand. So when you hire this outside video agency, you're also getting like a built-in actor to like represent your product kind of thing. So it's like, people buy into that as well, but that takes a lot of work to be able to kind of pull that off, right? And that probably
well, then it comes back to the whole budget thing. It's like, can you afford that for every video that you want on a trip or drop?
You're right. Chances are, once an outside video agency has gotten to that level, it's like, well, you're hiring them based on that, so they have quite the backlog of potential clients, right? And then they're going to charge accordingly because you want that video. I want them to make me one of their videos, kind of thing, right? So,
so our next point is having full creative control.
Yeah, that goes without saying that obviously if you keep it in-house, you're going to have the ability to do whatever the heck you want, based just obviously limited to your ability to create video in-house kind of thing. But outside of that, it's kind of world is your oyster, right? Yeah,
and then obviously that comes down to obviously the experience level of that said in-house, because you know, like Matt and myself have, you know, each have what, close to 10 years under our belts?
10 years now, over
10
years.
Of video production experience. So I'd say that's pretty well. I know there's obviously people who have way more years on us, but then there's also people who are just, you know, fresh, maybe out of school and whatnot. So having that creative control also allows the in-house team to kind of experiment and try new things.
That's right.
Now, obviously, that's a fine walk, because you don't want to be experimenting too much and then just everything is completely different. They're all their own standalone pieces, and it's just
everything's fragmented. Nothing really kind of connects.
But maybe, you know, you find those avenues that do allow you to kind of step away from that kind of style of videos that you do. You know, for us, you know, we take the opportunity when it comes to like holiday videos and whatnot, because it's not so much about the brand per se. It is, like, don't get me wrong, and but it's to have the culture kind of shine through. But at the end of the day, it's just to have fun and kind of
build on the personality.
Exactly. And just share that, you know, whether it's for Christmas, Halloween. Like, we love Halloween. Well, I really love Halloween, and I know you like Halloween. You don't dress up as much as I do, but regardless,
it's because I'm not as creative as you.
But yeah, it's just those areas, you know, allow a little bit more flexibility.
For sure. Yeah, that's when you get to have fun as an in-house team, for sure. Yeah. Or have fun in terms of just like, there's no kind of limitations. There's no like directive. It's just like, make a video.
Now, I know we're talking pros, but there is a slight con to that is there is that kind of mentality where you'll have your peers, your colleagues, get excited and, all kind of, shoot for the sky with all these ideas and, and it's like, we could have like, hundreds of people in front of a stage with a giant robot on, and it's like, being that video producer, yes, that's a great idea, but where are we going to get all those people? Where are we going to get a giant robot? And you have to kind of think within your own kind of bubble of, like, obviously you want to kind of step out and try new things, but don't be unrealistic with yourself and shoot for the top when that like whatever your peers are trying to achieve, just because they just get excited when it comes to video production, right?
The fun part about that is that like most of the videos that we produce, particularly the culture-based ones, outside of our pay, is produced on like a budget of like next to $0.
Yeah, views,
right? So that's, I mean, that's most of our videos that we produce, in fact, outside of, time factored in, that obviously has a cost associated with it, but outside of our personal time, it's pretty low budget, right?
Yeah,
low budget, I mean, just in terms of, cost itself, it's a really low price tag, right? For what we do, which obviously definitely is, for how much we output.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In a year,
for sure.
We output quite a bit within a year, including the culture-based stuff. That's a huge, I'd say that's huge savings.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to that point, but budget obviously being a lower. So whatever other points you have in regards to that?
Hold.
Save. So then you have our next point here. We has owning your own equipment. So you put in small print here. Means it's always available for reshoots next project.
We kind of talked about this. Is that is obviously the ability to own your own equipment means that you're versatile enough to be able to kind of pick that gear up in terms of really quick timeline stuff and just like get a video, get somebody on camera that's inside your company, and they want to do a shout out to somebody, or maybe a salesperson wants to do they have a VIP, and they want to do a quick shout out to somebody. You can get them on camera and just put them in front and get them to do something that's pretty clean, pretty straightforward. But again, it's about the content, less about a crazy wild video, right? Just that personalized touch is often all it takes sometimes to get a sale over the line kind of thing. Get a customer to sign, get a potential customer to sign up on something, to buy your product. So that's sometimes all it takes, is to just do that personal shout out. And again, as I mentioned previously when we were talking about the outsourcing topic, is the ability to kind of handle reshoots in-house is a lot easier, right? So if we produce a video and 6 months or a year down the road something changes about that video, or that product that we're highlighting, whatever, we can quickly kind of section out that piece that we need to reshoot, do that, and then we don't necessarily lose the entire video, right? And we can roll that video as a brand new piece of content effectively. Yeah,
and exactly to that point, right? Like, you can having the in-house team gives you a little bit more flexibility to do the run and gun, There isn't that bottleneck of, we need to shoot a video, but we now need to find somebody to do it, or we just have to do it with ourselves with our cell phone, right?
And that stuff can come into like tight timelines. Is like, okay, our conference is like coming up, that we're a conference that's like big for us. It's probably one of the top ones of the year, and then we realize that this content is out of date because something happened within the last week that changed. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, now this is out of date. Well, the agency that we usually work with can't necessarily get us booked in to do a reshoot in time, or the budget is just a little crazy to fit that into that month, or for whatever reason. Well, if you produce that video in-house out the gates in the first place, that means that things are just going to kind of gel better if you do have to do a reshoot, right? I mean, chances are that maybe that outsourced video, you could reshoot a section of that video in-house, but depending on how it was shot or whatever, it might not gel, and it might look like you just thumbed something in there to replace an outdated piece of content within a video. But if you produced it all in-house, you have a better chance of being able to replace things and make it look like it was always that way.
Yeah, and at the same time, like, because as you said, right, working with a production house is generally going to take you like a month to go through the entire process, pre-production, production, post-production, and then even the revision cycle. Now, with the in-house team, you know, you don't have to go through that entire process. As I said, it's more run and gun. It's just like, hey, we need this video, okay, and it's just like, you know, there obviously is some of that content you want to put through somewhat of a process of scripting and storyboarding, but you know, majority of those cases, it's not. It's just get somebody in front of the camera, have them, you know, either read a script off of a prompter or have them memorize it, or in some cases they just, you know, just run with it and wing with it and just kind of speak from the heart and just say what they want to say. And you know, and that's just getting in front of the camera, you know, quickly taking that footage, editing it, and then boom. And that could take a matter of 24 hours to 48 hours.
This all being said, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to have all the gear that we have. Like I said, we have a few video cameras, we have a number of lights, we have some good microphones, all that kind of stuff. But that can be achieved even by, you know, an in-house team that has virtually nothing. Maybe all you have is like a decent quality, pretty new cell phone, like an iPhone or an Android that shoots in 4K, for example, or 1080p. If you have one of those and you have like a decent microphone source on your subject, you can easily shoot the same thing that's like just as quick and just as like about the content that looks semi-decent, fairly decent. It's not like a Hollywood production, but chances are in a lot of cases it doesn't need to be. The amount of times that we have videos that we need to get out within a 2-day period, or times even that it's like, oh, we have somebody coming in and we'd love to get them on camera and we'd love to get it out for social that day. The amount of times that we have those requests come in ourselves, and we're able to just kind of fit that in and make that work. It's countless times now, right? So having that ability versus being like, shoot, we don't have an agency to be able to go and shoot this thing.
So what we're talking about right now, like, segues perfectly into the next point, which is having the ability or the flexibility to set your own timelines. And I think we riffed on it just on the previous thing. It was like, you know, hey, we have something coming up. We need, you know, we need to get something quickly shot, edited and out by end of week, right? Sure, it's not an ideal timeline being the video producers,
absolutely,
but you do have that, you know, ability to be like, hey team, like, we need to get this done. Whereas generally, if you're working with the production house, they won't do it, or if they are, they're gonna just
show me the price. Show me the money.
Because like they'll just do that. I'm like, yeah, sure, we can do that, but it's gonna cost you additional. And is it worth that? I don't know.
You decide. We can't say that.
Yeah, we can't tell you how to spend your money, but
it's circumstantial.
But that's what I mean. And you know, and then even, you know, working with the stuff, you know, I guess if you're going bigger production, I guess still there are those timelines in place, but I think this point, correct me if I'm wrong, really kind of drives home the quick factor and be able to, you know, it just kind of reduce that bottleneck.
Totally, yeah.
And just quickly get stuff out.
Yeah, it's being light, quick, and scrappy at the end of the day. That's what it's about. It's being flexible like that, and having that comfort to be able to deliver on that as an in-house individual. You know, like I said, maybe you're only equipped with like a wired microphone that plugs into your cell phone that gives you a better audio source in your person. You put them in front of, you know, they're facing a window, so you got some like built-in light from outside kind of splashing on their face, so that they're pretty nicely lit, you know, and you're just pointing your cell phone at them to deliver a message. Sometimes that's all it takes, but that message can oftentimes be a lot more effective than something that's like overly pre-produced and pre-planned and costs a lot of money and maybe doesn't really hit the target quite as much because it's overthought. So it's a delicate balance, right? So it's a sliding scale thing.
So I'm just going to jump to the last point here, which is budget.
Totally.
So
we were just talking about it before. Obviously, it's like chances are on a per video basis, by far and away, it's way cheaper to have us produce the videos in-house than it is to go to the outside agency. By far and away, it's much cheaper. So obviously, we have a yearly pay kind of thing, you know, and that's one thing to factor in, you know, to have us both on staff, it costs this much per year. Well, in order to get the value out of that, we have to be producing X amount of videos, right? But not only just volume of videos, but we have to make sure that they're quality videos across the scale, from like really quick stuff to a little bit more longer term stuff. We produce videos that take, a month to get out the door at times. It just depends on what we're producing.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, it factors back into, it's like, okay, we obviously have the technology and the tools and the platform to be able to see how those videos then performed, right? And how it affected our own company's pipeline. So if we were just producing videos that were nonsense and weren't really affecting pipeline, well then, our salaries aren't worth having us around, right? So that's obviously something to factor in, is that we're not just producing videos for the fun of it. We're producing videos to have an end result being, people are watching our videos and then become interested about the product that we have, right? And it's affecting sales.
Yep.
So that's our responsibility as producers, not to just be artsy fartsy people, but to affect the company in a positive manner. So
okay, so just to keep this moving along here, so let's. I'm just going to rip through the cons here, and then let's quickly kind of speak on those points. But I think they'll be pretty self-explanatory. And then actually, just looking at it will kind of reflect our points that we've talked about. So first one being here is difficult to provide that unbiased view. So we already talked on this in regards to working with the outsourced vendor, just given that they'll kind of have the voice of the people that. And that unbiased touch. Multiple equipment pieces needed. So that again, kind of riffs off the outsourced team.
That's right. They're going to have a lot more equipment, a lot more people, and a lot more talent.
They'll have all the proper tools at their disposal, whereas an in-house team, might have to get crafty with.
That's right. We have to get scrappy.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is fun in itself. So.
Yeah. Maybe too hard to define internal filming area. This is a very great point. Because if you're shooting generally, if you're an in-house production team, you're generally we're fortunate to have a little small studio. It's nothing major, but it works and allows people to get in, and I guess what's most importantly about it is that it's a quiet space, and that's generally what's difficult when trying to find the space around the office. Is that one, your office is noisy, depending obviously your type of office. We're in kind of an open space. Where there's really no closed off meeting rooms or anything like that. There are a few, given we are recording in one right now.
But not very many, and not really. And most of them aren't necessarily set up to have somebody stand in with a couple lights and a camera.
Exactly.
And have space for depth and everything.
Yeah.
Like that.
So, and I think what applies to all these points being in house is you have to get scrappy with it. And just make do with what you have. But these are the cons. In relation to in-house video production. Team size limits production capabilities, right there. You may have a lot of things on the go. You may be only a one-person crew.
We're just a couple people full time.
So and that's what I mean. So that obviously limits doing multiple videos at once. Like sure we can, but at the same time, like if you're a one-person video team, that person has to do all those steps, has to do like the scripting, storyboarding, maybe work with, maybe some content people to do the scripting, but they have to do the shooting, they have to do the editing, they have to do all those things. And for them to get that done, you can't really pull them and have them work on other stuff.
Exactly. It's going to mess up their timeline management that they're probably having to take on again, because they're probably also doing the project management of it all, right? So that means that they're going to have multiple projects on the go at any point in time. But if you constantly reprioritize other projects on top of what they have, it's just going to become this tornado of stuff that they never quite get to, or they're not able to properly treat as a single person in the in-house environment, being a video producer, right? If you're constantly being pulled out of a project, you're not just giving the respect to that piece of content to just let it kind of have a finish point, just be done and out the door, right? So everything needs its kind of own focus and own time. So.
And then last point to riff on here is using staff as actors.
That can be a con. It can be a pro, because sometimes if you have some talented people within your staff, they can best represent your product and your brand and your identity as a company. But sometimes not everybody's meant to be on camera, right? Not everybody's just as fluid and as natural at it. So you'll have somebody in a very specific role. We've touched on this in another podcast, where you'll have somebody in a very specific role, and it seems like at first glance, it's like we should use this person because they're in this position, and this video talks about this kind of subject matter, therefore we should have them. Sometimes though, if they're just gonna clam up and they're just sweating and they're no good, you have to kind of think about what your other options are gonna be. Oftentimes you can dodge that bullet altogether by just kind of having an idea of how you think that person is gonna be beforehand. You know, pay attention to their body language in meetings, or if they're doing a presentation, are they pretty cool, calm, and collected? Chances are they're gonna be pretty good on camera, or decent, you know, or at least coachable, right? But if they're gonna be that person that's very good at their job, but when they're doing a presentation, you see that they kind of have a little bit of struggles with it, and they're, you know, they have a hard time. Chances are if you throw a camera in front of them, it's gonna be that or worse, right? The same experience. So figure out, you know, whether or not it's worth having that person on camera to talk about that subject matter, or if somebody can be in their place and still represent that topic just as well. So that's important. So we do it quite a bit, where it's like we talk about things in a more open basis, so that we don't necessarily have to have one person that is a professional in that field. We do it for multiple reasons. Sometimes it's like we want to, you know, have a more diverse group of people within our videos, and that's very true. We love showing off the different people in our videos as much as we can. Oftentimes we have a short list of people that we know perform well. So based off of timeline and things like that, we'll go back to people and use them again. But again, that's dependent on timeline, and if we have the ability to kind of take the time to try out new people, then we will. But sometimes we don't have that time. So
that pretty much covers most of what I do want to ask one more thing.
But that was a lot. That was a lot. I know.
So it does cover, you know, the pros and cons of using an in-house team versus outsourcing your video production. Now, I just want to quickly just touch on, you know, just sharing examples that you have that, you know, where two can kind of go hand in hand, where, you know, having an in-house video team works, and then also bringing in an outside video team to help with certain projects.
So you mean kind of bringing the two together? So to speak. So I think I touched on this a little bit, just mildly in the outsourcing conversation, but we obviously are fortunate enough to be able to add some cost-saving measures for our company, because being a two-person team, if we plan it accordingly and we have the right timeline, we can outsource a job to an agency, work with them in tandem with our in-house people, writers, and their writers, to kind of refine our script as best we can. We'll typically do this when it comes to larger scale, what we expect to be larger budget videos, our top of funnel main videos that are going to last for a long time.
Campaigns.
So we'll put the effort in to kind of like working in tandem with them to refine script, and then we'll use them obviously because they're going to have a lot more specialists to be able to bring to the video set. And so we'll have multiple people running very specific things. We'll have a specific person on audio. There'll be a camera operator. They'll have their own director. There'll be a script supervisor. There'll be all that kind of stuff. So multiple people showing up to your set, which is great because they're all going to be specialized and deeply in focus on that job for that day or those few days on set. But what's nice for us is that we're able to cut out a decent amount of the costs and budget by taking the edit of that video back in-house, right? So we'll use them for pre-production, we'll use them for production. You know, one or both of us will be on set to help co-direct and kind of give the thumbs up on takes, things like that, without stepping over them too much, because that's the last thing we want to do. That's the breakdown of relationship. If we backseat drive, if you just trust them to do your job because you've worked with a company enough times, you know that they're going to deliver something to you, but at least you're there to be able to go like, you know, I'd love it if this line isn't coming out right. I'd love it if we just switched it to this. They might not be able to be the ones to make that call, but you being a representative of the company can make that call to be like, it's okay, we can change this and it won't affect the final end product. Then they're like, oh great. I think sometimes they love that. They're like, oh great, because we know this isn't kind of coming out right and it feels kind of disjointed. Things like that. Otherwise, they love, as long as, again, we don't backseat drive. But we can save thousands and thousands of dollars often just by taking the edit on ourselves and back in house. If we have the ability to do that between the two of us, yeah, it's a big cost savings for the company. I think it's kind of, and it's fun too, because sometimes then we get to work with footage that had a larger production to it, a more specialized crew. Therefore, when we take it on, things are a little bit more refined than what we'd have the capabilities to do being a two-person team, right?
Yeah.
So it's fun. We get to then take in the camera footage from the Red Cinema camera, for example, and that's fun because you get to do a lot of things with coloring it and things like that. It's just a different experience, right?
Yeah.
So my background was working with a lot more of that kind of stuff, so being able to dive back into that, for me, is really fun. I know you really enjoy kind of diving into the higher detail stuff too, and that kind of footage as well. So yeah, that's kind of cool. And again, like you said, it's kind of like, it's selfish. You're like, oh, we'll take it in-house, but at the same time, it's kind of fun. So cost savings, and it's a good experience for us too.
Yeah, and I think you nailed that one on the head. That's a perfect example where both in-house and outsourcing can kind of come together and work on a project.
What's a side note to that is that an added bonus of this, and we've experienced this recently enough, is that we had our own in-house content person, or she does a lot of the scripting for us, script writing for us and outlining. She did some script supervision on a production last year where it really opened her eyes to starting to realize the difference between, writing for a blog versus what it takes to write out a script when people are speaking, saying things out loud, and how that comes out. So it really, for her, she was blown away. She loved the experience, first of all. When you go on set, it's pretty cool for your first few times, seeing all the big lights and the big set, as it were. But not only that, she said, but it was an eye-opener in terms of how she wrote dialogue, right? She's like, this, for her, I think it really affected how and changed the way that she wrote dialogue going forward, because she kind of saw how it came out, and maybe some of those areas where it unintentionally, she said it enough times in her head that it made sense, but when it was said out loud on set, it sounded disjointed. She's and she was able to make those changes then, right? And we were able to work through that. So for her, it made her a stronger writer overall, which then taking that back in-house for even our in-house productions, it makes those little incremental improvements in-house too. So it's kind of sweet.
That's perfect. So I think we should wrap this up, and I guess my final thoughts in regards to this topic being in-house versus outsourcing is really, I guess, if you don't have anyone yet and you're looking to go down that path of pursuing, having a video strategy and having videos play a strong part of your business, I guess it really comes down to what is the type of content you're looking to produce. Because if you're looking just to get, a plethora of videos out there and you're not looking for that, top quality, high-end production, then your best bet is to bring it in-house. And maybe you don't have to look for that, top tier video producer. Maybe if you're just trying to get the ball rolling, maybe look at someone who's junior, who maybe is fresh out of school and is looking to build their portfolio and will work at obviously a lower salary, and then they will be ready to run with it and try to crank as many videos as they want, because it's going to be fresh off their heels. But at the same time, if you're not looking to be producing a plethora of videos, but at the same time you do want a video, you do have a video strategy in place, or maybe you have a year-long or maybe biannual campaign that you want to run that has a series of videos, then and maybe that is the right path of looking at an outsourced vendor, because they can kind of take this whole campaign on as a whole and apply a strategy to all the videos and maybe come up with a very neat and creative idea that applies, whether it's a series-based campaign, video campaign, or own standalone bits that fit under the umbrella of that campaign, but all have their own kind of consistency, whether that's just given that it's I'm blanking, I'm having a brain fart right now, the external video producer, having them, work on each one, so there is that consistency across, yet maybe they're not supposed to be specific to each one. So I think those are kind of two, pretty broad examples on kind of where to steer your video strategy in regards to video production. So really kind of buckle down and think about what type of content you want to produce, and kind of go about it that way, and whether you bring somebody in-house or keep it external.
Just do it, just get started. Makes the movie magic.
All right, tune in next time. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening.
See ya.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Video Island podcast brought to you by Vidyard. You can subscribe to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform or check out more videos here.